Okay, so I've seen quite a lot of confusion and, dare I say, intentional misinformation regarding the International Court of Justice ruling in the case of South Africa against Israel. So I thought of doing this video with a brief-ish summary and explanation about what happened last week in The Hague. First, so we are all on the same page, the ICJ is a UN body that acts as some sorts of a court for nations. When there's a dispute between two countries, a country could sue the other country in international court. There are 15 judges that are presiding in the ICJ from 15 different countries. They are appointed by the General Assembly of the UN. And when a country that is a side of a hearing is not represented by a judge, this country could appoint an ad hoc judge on its behalf. And so South Africa initiated a case against Israel for the alleged genocide in Gaza. The court previously ruled that any country could bring forward a case of genocide. It doesn't have to be involved in that specific conflict. Israel and South Africa both signed the Genocide Convention that was formed after the worst genocide in human history, which is, of course, the Holocaust. The crime of genocide is built on two factors: the physical element, including killing, uprooting, preventing reasonable conditions of living, and the mental element, mainly the intent to commit genocide. South Africa claimed that Israel is guilty of both. Their legal team based their allegations on the number of victims in Gaza, the destruction of infrastructure, the uprooting of civilians from the North Strip to the southern part of the Strip, and the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip, to name a few. They also claimed that there was intent to commit genocide and brought forward a list of quotes by Israeli officials, politicians, even celebrities that allegedly expressed an intent to harm the Palestinians as a group.
The intent to destroy Gaza has been nurtured at the highest levels of state, as President Isaac Herzog has joined the ranks of those signing bombs destined for Gaza.
The South African team's main request was that the court order Israel to immediately stop the war.
The state of Israel shall immediately suspend its military operations in and against Gaza.
Israel, on the other hand, claimed that there is no genocide nor intent to commit genocide in Gaza. It based its claims on efforts to protect civilians from harm. Israel, for example, told of leaflets that were distributed calling civilians to evacuate their homes. Israel told of hundreds of trucks with humanitarian aid that are entering Gaza on a daily basis. It explained that the damages to infrastructure and the number of casualties are due to Hamas acting within civilian population and using public and civilian buildings for military purposes.
Houses, schools, mosques, UN facilities and shelters are all abused for military purposes by Hamas, including as rocket launching sites. In the slides before you, you can see a militant priming projectiles for launch on IDF forces in Gaza. You can see the holes in the residential house to hide and launch them.
Israel declassified 30 confidential documents from cabinet meetings showing its efforts in transferring humanitarian aid into Gaza and told of the close legal advice it's getting before every military action is taking place. In regards to the intent, Israel brought quotes from high-ranking army officials and leaders in charge of waging the war who said that Israel's war was solely against Hamas and not the people of Gaza.
The Prime Minister stated time and again, we must prevent a humanitarian disaster.
Israel's main request was for the court to dismiss the case. Israel claimed that South Africa is trying to use the ICJ as a political tool, knowing that it has no legal grounds for its claims, trying only to smear Israel in the public's opinion by connecting Israel with the act of genocide.
Since the court has no other business before it today, the sitting is declared closed.
The court adjourned and the judges had now to reach a decision. And here there is a point that I think is very important to make. This is only a preliminary hearing. It's all about provisional measures. The question of whether Israel is or is not committing genocide was not even discussed. This question will only be ruled at the end of the main hearing. It will take years. The only thing that the judges were supposed to be deciding at this point was whether there's any justification to intervene, and if so, in which capacity. The legal bar is relatively very, very low at this point. So it took 2 weeks and the judges reached a decision. The president read it out loud.
The court meets today to deliver in open court its decision on the request for indication of provisional measures submitted by South Africa in the case concerning application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip.
For 40 minutes, she read a very harsh description of the situation in Gaza. The casualties, the humanitarian crisis. She used an assessment made by UN bodies that talk about a horrific tragedy that is unfolding in the Gaza Strip. And after that came the decision itself.
The court concludes on the basis of the aforementioned considerations that the conditions required by its statute for it to indicate provisional measures are met. It is therefore necessary, pending its final decision, for the court to indicate certain measures in order to protect the rights claimed by South Africa that the court has found to be plausible.
The first ruling was against Israel's request to dismiss the case. The court ruled that it has jurisdiction and a cause to see the case up until its end. Later came the 6 provisional measures that the court decided on. The first one is that Israel should prevent acts that are categorized as genocide. The second is that Israel should prevent the IDF from breaching the Genocide Convention. The third is that Israel should prevent and punish incitements to genocide. The fourth is that Israel should preserve evidence. The fifth is that Israel should ensure the provision of humanitarian aid to the civilians of Gaza. And the final decision was that in a month's time, Israel would submit a report describing how it acted according to the measures mentioned. So what does it all mean? Firstly, the court didn't order Israel to stop the war. It did so merely 2 years ago against Russia, not this time. In fact, all of the provisions that we've talked about have no significant influence on how the war in Gaza is being fought. Israel would claim, and is claiming, that it's doing everything it can to prevent genocide, to supply humanitarian aid, and to act against incitements, regardless of the court's ruling. In that aspect, South Africa didn't get what it asked for. Far from it. Even in terms of the report that Israel needs to submit to the court, South Africa initially requested it to be sent in a week's time. The court gave Israel a month. So it's clear that the ICJ does not deem the situation in Gaza to be of the most crucial urgency in order to actually change anything about how Israel is conducting its war. So in this regard, it's a very convenient ruling for Israel, and one that many Israeli experts actually expected before time. There are, though, 3 points in which Israel is affected and not to its favor. The court did say that there is merit to some of the South African claims. The court also did not dismiss the case, and Israel will spend the next few years defending itself for alleged genocidal acts. The damage in the public opinion is already done, regardless of the actual legal results. The third point is the issue of the report, because after Israel will submit its report, South Africa has the right to reapproach the court and appeal against what Israel mentioned in it. If the court finds that the South African claims are valid, it might issue new provisional measures. It will take time. Experts say that while it happened before, it's not very reasonable. But Israel now has what you might call an international legal chaperone, looking at its actions more closely. In any case, this is the legal situation now. The war in Gaza continues almost exactly as it did before the ICJ's ruling. But there is one more thing that I want to mention, and that's the call to release the hostages.
It is gravely concerned about the fate of the hostages abducted during the attack in Israel on 7 October 2023 and held since then by Hamas and other armed groups, and calls for their immediate and unconditional release.
Officially, legally, the hostages held in Gaza are not part of the case, and still, All of the judges, including the judge from Lebanon, from Morocco, from Somalia, decided to finish their joint statement by calling for the hostages to be immediately and unconditionally released. So yeah, I hope this summary helped you understand a bit better what happened in the ICJ last week and helped clear out some of the misinformation or the confusion. Until next time.